Hello, hello.
Good morning.
Are we on episode 6?
Yes.
All right, episode 6 of Vessel Vision. Today we're going to talk about this in the middle of the night, like the whole night. I was getting the same phrase over and over again. And I was like, yeah, I got it. I got it. What they said, what your story exactly did I say? They said it's funny. I just said it to Claire before. It was what is your story becomes your story. So your story becomes your story. And it was like that the story is the big picture of your life, like the story of your life. So say, my time on earth is done. What will be the story that was my life? And what they were trying to say is my story about how events have unfolded or how things have worked out or not worked out actually shapes and creates the story of my life. So, to give an example, you get divorced, and the story of the divorce could be from many angles, but I'll present two. One is, oh my God, he was such a dick. I mean, God, I'm terrible. I'm a terrible picker. I just don't even know how to pick guys. Like, I shouldn't even try. I shouldn't even try anymore. Like, all I do is get hurt. I get hurt and I got to move my shit all over the place again. That's, a couple stories. I'm talking to my girlfriends, whomever. Then there's another story, which would be, wow, I really learned a lot from that relationship. I mean, it was super hard, but I'm reflecting upon like what I brought to the relationship that either enhanced it or broke it down. And I'm so grateful that I had that time to learn more about myself. Okay, same thing happened to me. It's just what is my story I'm telling about it? And from the second version of the story, I step into empowerment. I step into embodiment. I step into greater understanding of who I am. And that shapes another story altogether.
Yeah, I love stories, of course. And maybe just for anyone listening or watching, like think about some of your favorite stories. Think about some of your favorite stories as a kid. What did you read over and over again? What did you watch over and over again? And sometimes we can see that the stories we were drawn to as a child get played out over and over in our lives, for better or for worse. Um, Interestingly, I think about a story I loved as a child was Little Mermaid. Little Mermaid had just come out or close to when I was born, and it was a big deal. And it was my favorite movie, and I watched it on repeat. I was probably 4 or 5, and I had everything Little Mermaid. So then I go back and I'm like, what is it about Ariel specifically that I loved and idolized about her as the heroine of a story? And, I can take that in 100 different ways. And now, of course, there's all the criticism of like, oh, she gives her voice up, and it's not necessarily a light filled story. But what did I love about Ariel? What did you love about the main characters in the stories that you grew up on? And for me, she was rebellious. She didn't want to do what her dad had planned for her. And she wasn't like all the rest of her sisters. That whole scene where they're all like, oh, Ariel, she's got her head in the clouds. I don't remember what they used. Obviously, it's in the water, but she's never here. She's always off doing whatever she wants. She's dreaming of a different world. She feels like she doesn't belong in this world. I can't remember the amount of times, like as a young adult, I would say, I feel like I don't belong here. I don't feel at home here. And by here, I just meant like in my life, in this system, the society that we're living in. So I think just starting with brainstorming and reminiscing, what are those stories that you loved? And is there gold in there for you to come to an awareness of what you love about your own story? For me, I do see myself as a bit of a rebel. So I love connecting with those characters in a story. Um,
Okay, so we're taking two unique angles here. So we'll try and find a way to weave them together. So Claire, the heroine or the main character was a rebel. So Claire, you're talking about like the qualities you really loved about her and how they resonated with you. So okay, so totally getting that. Wondering, do you think that the story that was Little Mermaid shaped you in some ways, or do you think that you were drawn to the story because it was so resonant? So that's like one question. And then another thing, I'm thinking about reading stories. You want the heroine, right? You want, when you're reading a book, you don't want it to end with like, and she died sad, broken, and alone. You'd be like, well, that is really a terrible story. I don't want to read that. So it's like Claire's asking you to think about kind of the characters and why you liked the characters. And then I'm asking you to think about the book too, that it becomes the book of your life and how we are shaping that through understanding that I'm a rebel, or, or you, some other lens to see that through, Claire, though, would be, I just can't get along with people. I don't fit in. So it's like the story, I'm a rebel, that lens is empowering, right? That lens makes you feel empowered and unique and, just vibrant and alive. But like the other lens, so your story becomes your story. If your story is you're a rebel, that's kick ass, you're badass. That's awesome. But if your story is, I just can't get along, I can't do things the way that I'm supposed to, your story about who you are is empowering you, right?
mhm.
Rather
Yeah.
than, yeah.
It makes me think of, I think it was 2 weeks ago, we did the episode on co-creation. We're co-creating by just who we naturally are and in interaction with the things, the events and the people and everything that's going on around us. And we had talked about we're co-creating with our sense of the divine. And when you ask the question, do stories create? Hell yeah. Hell
Totally.
yes, they do. And I used to have a little sign in my classroom that said, your story matters. And it seems trite or whatever, but that was kind of what fueled my teaching, was like, if I could just get kids to truly believe that their story matters, which, going back to creation, bringing something into matter, into form, or rearranging matter, like we talked about,
Right.
your story creates that. And you can take a different approach and say, well, yeah, you're just drawn to the stories that resonate for you. And yes, that does sometimes happen, but I'm also drawn to stories that like really fuck me up sometimes, that'll like shake something loose. Those stories, films, TV shows, whatever, that like you keep thinking about for
Right.
days afterwards. It's like it's jarred something loose. It's opened a door that maybe wasn't open before.
Totally. And even that question, your story matters, gets someone to at least engage in the thought process of, what is my story? What words do I choose to shape my story? And words have vibrations, have power. They're either empowering or they're disempowering. So we can speak a sentence that's supposed to mean the same thing, but it holds a totally different vibration. So starting to think about your story matters. It's like, what is my story? Is my story that, I'll go to, you're talking about Little Mermaid. Is my story that I don't belong here? I don't fit in. I'm a rebel, or is it I'm really unique? I am the unique individual with something one of a kind to bring to whatever these systems. And I know that's your story where you are now, but getting people to think about is what I say to myself about myself, and is what I say to others about myself empowering or disempowering? And that's, I don't know that we paid that much attention to. I mean, just even before we started today, Claire was like, "What'd you do this weekend?" And I mean, I wanted to be able to say I did something really fun and exciting because I don't know. I want a story of a fun weekend. But the truth of the matter was, there was really no way to spin it into like, oh my gosh, it was such a high vibe weekend. But I think about that, right? I'm thinking about, I want my story to be alive. I want it to be vibrant. So it's not always going to be like that, right? We're in different seasons at different times and different times of life. It just is what it is. But I could have said, my story for the weekend could have been like, it sucked, actually. I'm cleaning shit up all the time. And you know what? I got nothing growing in my garden because it's been super cold. And I hula hooped just to seriously get some energy moving around me. Then I, had to deal with dissolving a partnership. And I mean, the whole thing sucked. Okay, that's one angle. But I'm like, I don't take that angle anymore. I don't say that story. So it was funny. I was digging for a way to communicate what my weekend was in a way that I wasn't a victim. I was expressing my truth, but I wasn't a victim. I wasn't like, oh my God. Yes, there were irritations about the weekend, but how do I talk about the things that are difficult? How do I talk about it? And that do I let that swallow me up? So, and some days the best you can do is make it a neutral story. You just got to make it a neutral story when it's difficult and it was really hard. And that's not to say you don't express your truth. It's not to say you're not in touch with your feelings, but bringing an awareness to this engagement I'm sharing with Claire this morning. I don't want to just be like, my weekend sucked. Actually, it was pretty fucking shitty because it's like, I'm throwing that out. First of all, I'm throwing that at Claire, but then my words vibrate and they're going to create the story then that goes out into my day. And then a day becomes a week, and then a week becomes a month, and a month becomes a year. And it's all about how I frame my story and then how I express my story.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because, spiritual bypassing is something that's come into my awareness recently. And I think that's a challenge as we are attempting to, and maybe you say it like, see the world with rose colored glasses, but I think I understand what you're saying. It's more about like leaning into, how do I want to feel? How do I want to feel after telling this story? And how do I want to feel about this story? And how do you want to feel about your weekend? You don't want to be sitting there being like, oh, what a shitty fucking weekend. You want to feel empowered. And so you chose your words specifically and carefully. And I liked that, coming from a neutral place. It doesn't have to be a moral issue, doesn't have to be right or wrong, doesn't have to be good or bad. I think that neutrality, that place of acceptance, can allow us to find joy in the ordinary when we're in those seasons of maybe feeling like we're coasting or feeling like we're not moving forward. But to just kind of explain, like, spiritual bypassing is similar to gaslighting, if you know what gaslighting is, but it's when someone is sharing something really hard and painful, and we kind of just love and light our way around that. It's an inability or a refusal to enter into someone's pain, which we get to choose when we want to enter into that with someone. We don't always have the capacity to do that, but if you are at a place where like I can offer compassion, I can offer my empathy, and um, then it's more than just saying, "Oh, sending love and light." I love sending love and light. That's my revised version of prayer these days. I do still say like, "Oh, I'll pray for you." Some people still use that language, but the bypassing is really dangerous in my mind. Um, I think that we can do it to others really easily, and we can do it to ourselves really easily. So I love that you brought this in, because we we get to practice having the discernment of like, Julie, if you truly had a weekend where you felt like you needed to sit with yourself and mourn some things and cry it out, like that's a different scenario than like, it was just kind of a shitty weekend. I don't really want to give energy to this,
Oh,
you know?
yeah, no, you're right, Claire. That's a good point. Like, of course, it's not glossing over everything in your life, empowering through things that felt, painful or difficult, or it has nothing to do with I can't really share this with Claire because she's not going to reflect back to me what I need. It's just simply an understanding. First of all, I got through the weekend. Okay. Nothing terrible happened. There's no big drama about it. So how much time, how many, how many pages in the story that is my life am I giving to this weekend? Not, I'm not even giving a page. I mean, maybe it gets 3 words in the story. And it doesn't even get 3 words because it was pretty inconsequential. And so I think sometimes, say people talk on Mondays. That's what we do. How was your weekend? What'd you do? Blah, 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 blah. And we share these stories about our weekends, right? And maybe I'm the person who every time pretend I went to an office on Monday. You know, I have these big drama. Oh, you won't believe it. It's like, and then there's the person that they did the coolest stuff ever, and then there's the person who stayed home with their cat the whole weekend. But I mean, it's kind of understanding what persona am I taking on? If I am the main character, who am I, right? What am I bringing to others? And when I talk about things that I find to be just kind of boring or mundane, no, nobody needs to hear that. So it's when I recognize we're all also co-creating the story of being a human on this earth. It's like, okay, well, is my what I'm offering to that story right now, is that valuable in any way? Is it relevant in any way? No, not really. So it's like, yeah, I'm just probably not going to put it out there.
Hmm. So to kind of bring up another piece that popped into my mind when you were talking, it's asking ourselves the question, how attached am I to this story? And I think about trauma, past trauma. And for me, for a long time, my story was, oh, I was really sick with an eating disorder. I partied my way out of college and had to come back. Oh, then I had to go back to college. All my friends from school graduated before I did. Like, oh, I've struggle with addiction. And I've been, in my 30s, been trying to find more of that balance of, do I want this to continue to be my story? I mean, I don't need to rewrite the past. I'm super grateful for everything that we went through together and that I went through, and I can truly say I don't have regrets. And I also want to be able to let that story go, even though it shaped me, it molded me, it literally uncurled my life the way it was meant to be. I don't really want to identify with the struggle anymore. And I do still, in full vulnerability with my relationship with food. It's a constant thing in my mind. And it just recently came in that was like, what is my story around my relationship with food? Oh, it's really hard. It's been passed down to me from all the women in my line. This is something I'm carrying forever, and that's something that I don't resonate with AA and NA. They do wonderful things for people, but the whole like, I'm Claire and I'm an alcoholic forever. Like, no, I refuse to hold on to those stories of woe as a way, as a thing that defines me, even though it has. So I don't know what your thoughts are.
Well, I mean, I think you are reflecting on where you've come from. And of course, that was your story. When you were 18 or 19 or 20, at the time there wasn't a lot more to talk about because that was the main plot. And but now you're in a different part of your story. And to keep talking about where you are now in reference to something that yes, you're grateful for because it made you who you are, but bringing that strife and that energy into a new creation is just going to kind of muddy that up. Um, and also, I'm in a similar mindset regarding identifying as an illness. Like what are you talking about? You can't lead with your identity as an illness. It's just that can't be good. The biggest thing I think in science right now is epigenetics. I think, and it's literally the environment in which your cells are swimming, you're swimming. That literally has the power to change the expression of your DNA. So, we've had this idea that, like, oh, well, everyone in my family has cancer, so I'm just going to get cancer. Well,
Yeah.
guess what? If that's your story, you're going to get cancer. And we have that much power over our genetic expression. So to say I am this and it's a disease is like, don't do that. It feels to me like you're actually hexing yourself. Like you're putting a lid on these great possibilities that are yet to like burst forth because you got this low vibration lid on who you are, and you're going to announce that to everybody around you. No, that's not a great idea in my opinion. So I
That
think
just happened with I was talking to my sister, and that has been our story that like breast cancer runs in the family. Oh, grandma had it, our aunt had it, mom's gonna, blah blah blah. And then I heard it for the first time. Again, we've talked about this every week, is like bringing the awareness to it. I heard it. It was like, oh well, breast cancer runs in the family, we're most likely gonna get it. And I was like, what?
no,
And I just said, not my story, not my story, not my story. And even using, the power of I am, we use I am to create mantras to change our internal environment. I am love. I am powerful. I am whole, right? And that's the power of mantra, and starting with the I am, and then to add a disease or anything that would be lower vibrational. It's like,
no, don't do it. Yeah, absolutely no. And other people passing down their stories, right? Stories passed down from generation to generation, ideally are from wisdom keepers, from the great sages and the crones of the family who have gleaned so many lessons from these hardships as a way to transmute the past pain, right? So that the younger generation doesn't continue to struggle in this way. But now the stories are different. It's like, well, grandma had this and aunt so and so had that. And it's like, no, no, no. And, I was thinking when you were talking about your, struggle with food, I remember, I had this, God, I was in and out of, treatment centers, feeding tubes, whatever. It was just kind of a thing. It was just a thing. And it was my story, whatever. And I went to this one doctor said to me, and my husband was there at the time, well, she's just chronic. I mean, she's never going to get over it. She's just going to be in and out of hospitals her whole life because
like her. Mm-hmm.
she's had this disease for so long. And, if you don't catch anorexia, I don't know, in the first, like, I don't know, 18 months, you're like, nope, you're just, and at that time I had it for a very long time. And I remember when she tried to make that my story, that's where I can relate to the rebel in you. I was like, you will not write my story for me. I'm writing my story, not you. And it stuck with me. And just because I was just like, don't you dare try and make a declaration about the rest of my life.
Mm-hmm.
Are you joking me right now? And guess what? That wasn't my story. My story was one of triumph and victory against all mother freaking odds. So,
Right. Right.
so think about too how people are telling you who you are or who you can't be. It's like, no, I'm writing my story.
Yes. Yeah, that who else is trying to co-author your story? And a friend of mine mentioned, and I may be butchering this, but authority has the word author in it. Like, you have the authority, we have the authority in our lives to be writing this story, regardless of what we can control externally. And it also makes me think, okay, so sometimes you might hear someone else's voice in your head telling you, maybe it was a teacher, a parent, any other authority figure telling you something about yourself, trying to define some aspect of who you are. And I'll just share one for me was that, like, my darkness is too much. My darkness is scary for the people in my life. And that story was implanted in high school. And that's something that I've really had the joy of reclaiming, mostly in my 30s, of saying, like, my darkness is beautiful. It is necessary. It is the place from which all things are created and birthed. It's the cycle of what my body and my life is doing. So and that had been labeled depression, right? Or anxiety. And, of course, then you want to medicate that, and everyone's got different solutions for your story. And I was able to reclaim that story, and now I don't say I struggle with depression. I say I'm in an underground mode. I'm probably not going to be reaching out. I'm not going to be doing a lot of socializing. I'm composting. So catch you on the other side, versus like I'm depressed.
Mm-hmm.
I just
Well,
feel different saying that, those two things, like in my
yeah,
body.
totally. Because one is a natural, changing of the tides of the seasons, right? And it's just natural. And anytime we are attached to holding on to a specific feeling or vibratory state, we're not in flow, we're not in the rhythm. So if I just wanted it to be summer all the time, and every time summer turns to fall, I was running around trying to glue the leaves back on the trees, just like, no, resisting what is, that'd be ridiculous. That would just be ridiculous, you know what I'm saying? Or like every time winter came, it's like, nope, I'm wearing a swimsuit all day, every day. Like winter, it's like, no, this is natural. So there are times in your life you got to go underground, right? And
Yeah, we don't
it-
try to medicate the trees. We're like,
no,
oh God, it's lost all of its leaves. Like, put it on medication.
right. It's like, guess what? If you let the tree do its thing, the leaves will come back naturally.
Yeah.
So, and if the conditions are supporting the tree. So if the
Sorry,
conditions,
disclaimer, medication is not bad. Medication is very helpful for various seasons of life. I just want to say that.
yeah, everybody gets to do life the way they want to. So thanks for that. It's true. And we'll just leave that there. Anyway, so okay, the tree is going to in the spring show signs of new life, right? Little new growth is going to come in if the tree is in conditions that support that. So if you find that you're in winter for a very, 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 very long time, right? Because there's a natural ebb and flow to all this. You might want to start thinking about, are the conditions in which I find myself contributing to this lengthening of this really long season? Am I in conditions that now support this new life? After composting, I should be ready, man. I should be ready to burst forth. And, I remember talking to someone who had struggled a long time with depression and had been on every kind of medication and, just really down, down, down. And she's a beautiful person and had so much to offer, just so much to offer, great heart. But her life was kind of a mess. And she wasn't necessarily addressing that. And so I said to her, well, of course you're depressed. Your life is depressing. Your body is it's a natural response. When the things around you, whether you hate your job, you're in an abusive relationship, whatever, you're not getting outside and generating new life by just being in nature, right? That's depressing. So your body is doing exactly what it's supposed to, which is giving you a signal like, hey, this doesn't work. This doesn't work. This doesn't work. So, I don't know how we now are on this topic, but it's true. Don't be afraid of those seasons that enter in. Don't attach who you are to a specific season in your life.
Yeah.
Allow it to transform.
Yes.
Yeah.
I love that. And also, this is a little awareness, this little game you can play with yourself. How do you time or what's the word I'm looking for? Like chronological. Is there a verb for that? I don't know.
I know what you're trying to say.
How do you mark the time
How
of
do
your life?
basically how you chronicle, right?
Chronicle. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
How do you chronicle the seasons of your life? And I had this realization the other day that I do it by largely like guys I was dating at the time, which is interesting, super interesting to me. And I was like, oh, are there stories here I could maybe let go of? Or even I would do it by like jobs. And I'm like, does that feel good for me to like chronicle my life by a job I worked? I don't know. So that's just something I've been playing around with, maybe a different way of just thinking about different segments of my story.
Well, okay, so that goes to like your identity, right?
Yeah.
So my identity is not coming from internal whatever, whether it's qualities and characteristics, and that society is set up that way. So if I'm a main character in this society, I am a mother, I am whatever I am now. I mean, I've done a million things. I'm a designer, and so you in that time, right, you could identify with who you were, like, oh, well, I was a teacher at this school. I'm a teacher. And oh, well, I was so and so's boyfriend, because many of us kind of allow the outside to reflect who we believe ourselves to be.
Mhm.
And so if you think about, if you were going to sit down and write a story, right? You're going to write about the main character. It's really important to know, like, what's driving this character from the inside. Who is she? What are her hopes and what are her dreams? And it'd be a really flat character if it's like, well, my character is a teacher at, Lindbergh, this, high school, and this is what she likes to eat, and she has 3 kids. It's like, okay,
Hmm.
very flat, right? But that's how we kind of walk around as my character. It's like I'm telling people not who I am, what I do.
Yes. Oh, I love looking at that from like character development. Like, and this is a good reminder for me too. What are the stories? Because I feel like we've lost, Western culture isn't super story centric the way many other cultures are. And so if I had to tell you, you know, I was just reading Women Who Run with Wolves, and the author, Clarissa Pinkola Estes, she talks about all these stories her family has passed down. And I can't tell you one damn story passed down in my family. And
Other than you're all going to have cancer.
right, right. Other than what we've all struggled with forever.
Right.
And I find that super interesting. So I'm like, okay, if I were thinking about a story from my life that I would want to pass down, and if you like, you can even play with like turning it into a bit of a myth. Um, what are those stories of, for me, it would be stories of triumph, victory, when my heart was blown open by something so beautiful, relationships. And I think sometimes to piggyback on relationships, that can be the hardest story to change. When you're in a close relationship with a person, you know, it can be easier to change our story sometimes than this story that you've co-created with another person. Because you would think, oh, well, they have to be on board for me to change the story. And it's like, yes, that would be helpful. But sometimes the story has to start changing with one person. I was just thinking that.
No, it's true. I mean, and at the end of that story, whether the relationship goes on, in the same fashion and format as its current presentation or turns into something else, if you are a conscious creator of how your character is engaging with the story that you're co-creating with a partner, when you find yourself, at the so-called end, to be able to reflect back and say, my character's fucking great, man. She led with love. She led with authenticity. She led with integrity, honesty, passion. Then that's a great story,
Mm.
but to get tangled up in the other character's muck and then have it pull you down, the end of that story, you're like, man, shit. I'm not sure I'm in love with my character anymore.
Mm.
I'm not sure I'm in love with my character. And, you think of the word character and then being a woman of character. It's interesting that those words are the same. And, I hope at the end of my life, I can reflect back and be really proud of my character.
Yeah. So maybe, in those relationships with other people, a good place to start, instead of waiting for them to come up in moments of uh, tension, maybe just think, what are some of the main stories in this relationship? And they will come up in moments of tension. You know what it is. It's the track that plays. Push play on the tape and it's like, okay, here's this story again. Wow, what a great rerun. And you notice them. If you ever catch yourself being like, God, this again. How are we back here again? I
Right.
thought we moved past this. I thought we moved beyond this. It's like that's a signal that you've got a story coming up. And that's that moment where we can stop and pause and say, like, huh, okay, first recognize that this is a repeated story. Then ask, is this a story that is still true for me? How attached am I to this story? And if you're feeling ready to let that story go, what would that look like? Could you write a different story?
Sometimes people are attached to being right. And I find in a lot of people around me in relationships, maybe what runs in my family is stubborn and, whatever, a need to be right. And, you want to be right or do you want to be happy? So if you're in these, loops with a partner or a loved one, let's face it, what's behind wanting to be right? What's behind wanting to have that last word? Usually it's a fear of, you don't see me, you don't know me, you don't love me. And guess what, those are a little bit tougher topics to tackle than why do you load the dishwasher wrong every time.
Yeah.
So our stories that are playing on repeat in those, sort of special relationships, what's underneath that, that's really what's driving the story. And the story can be a conscious creation or an unconscious creation, and it's going to lean towards unconscious if you're not able to look at, what's underneath that loop of, you told me you were taking the trash out, you didn't take the trash out. It's like, oh, am I not important to him? And then talking about that. And he might not even be able to hear that. What are you talking about? Who's fucking important to me? But at least you've started having a dialogue and honoring yourself, knowing yourself. Like, this is what this is about. I feel like I must not matter to him. Oh, all right, let me go back in time. When was the first time I'm in my life I can remember or feeling like I didn't matter? And then get quiet, get a piece of paper, and oh, and it's likely you're going to hit on some big ones. And if you're too much in your brain, you can use your non-dominant hand and it will bring you to a place of vulnerability. You'll access different parts of your brain. You'll get to really what's the real plot of this story, because it's not the trash, it's not the dishwasher, it's not whose house we're going to for Christmas. It's something else.
Hmm. Yes. So,
So,
bringing it back around to the beginning, what are your favorite stories? And as they come up over and over again, are these stories that are serving you? Are these stories that are honoring who you are today, now? And if not, are these ready to be rewritten or let go of?
yeah, and identify in each, exchange. Am I characterizing myself as the villain, the victor, or the victim? And the victor is the one who rises above and tries to bring a higher vibration to what's going on. We all know what the other two represent. Oh, he always does this to me. But it's, what role am I playing right now? And what role do I want to play? Because if you want to play the victim, I mean, just be honest about it. At least identify, yeah, no, I just kind of feel like playing the victim right now. Okay. But bringing that awareness to it's going to help you write a much, in my opinion, more interesting and beautiful story.
So thank you for bringing your stories to the world. Your story matters. Our world is changing our stories, and as long as we can pivot and shift and change with those new archetypes coming in, we can let some of these old stories rest.
Yeah, and our world is changing our stories, and we're changing the story of the world.
Yes.
It's a very dynamic co-creation.
Beautiful.
All right. Thank you for joining us. It's always good to see you, Claire.
You too, Julie. Love you all.